Well, hello, everyone. Welcome to another edition of the Scooting Scholar. Today is Thursday, May the 31st, 2018. It's hard to believe we've already gone through another month that quickly. And in case you have forgotten, I am Richard Lawrence. I am the Scooting Scholar. Welcome. Let's see. Well, what was I going to say? Yeah, it's into the month. I'm hoping and praying that I got my audio straightened out. Last week looked like everything was going well. Then I reviewed the recording and I noticed I had an echo going on. So I'm hoping that that's not the case this week. Um, the What was I going to say? Somehow, yeah, like I said, I left my camera rolling and I had the microphone at the same time, and I didn't mute that microphone, so it caused me to have double the fun. But I'm sure it was. If you did watch, it probably was a little bit annoying. I certainly don't blame you if you abandoned ship right away, because it was, even though it was easy to understand me, it just didn't sound right. So I'm hoping that I've straightened out some of those audio errors. Basically, what I have to do is I have to go through a checklist of things I need to do before I go on air, or before I, well, not really on air, but before I broadcast across the net, right? So one of the things is trying to make sure YouTube is working, and so the YouTube is streaming. I can see myself there streaming on YouTube. I'm hoping I left the audio settings the same as the previous week, so I'm hoping that that remains the same, so that my audio remains the same. I have my microphone running. I have my headphones on. I've loaded up I finally have my little bug in down there in the corner. So if you're watching left side of, or excuse me, the right side, lower right hand corner of your screen, you can see my little scooter bug there. Right. So that looks good. So I think pretty much everything is in order. So as I try to keep my eye on the camera, but then also looking at my little switcher device. It's been quite a week, right? There's just so much freaking news. I don't know where to begin, really. But I guess we have to begin with the obvious, right? Let me see if I can get my graphics up here. Here we go. So, should we go with the obvious? I guess we should, right? So the obvious would be Roseanne and ABC. If you haven't figured it out by now, and you know what, that's one thing I should have downloaded, but maybe I can find it if I go to my second screen on the internet, and show the tweet again. But I think we all know the tweet that Roseanne posted. What was it, on early in the morning on Tuesday or late at night on Monday, Memorial Day, or maybe it was on Memorial Day. Maybe that's what it was. But where she basically equated Valerie Jarrett with as the child of the Muslim Brotherhood and an ape, right? And of course, some people, I have no problem with what ABC did afterward by canceling her show. In fact, now I know this may sound as hyperbole, but I think that was one of the most selfish tweets ever. Think about it. Think of all the people that lost their jobs, and I'm not talking about stars. I'm not talking about stars such as Sarah Gilbert, or the man who plays her husband. I can't think of his name right now, but people who were oh gosh, Laurie Metcalf, Sarah Gilbert, and why can't I think of her TV husband? But anyway, Goodman, or yeah, Goodman, right? Anyway, John Goodman, right? Yeah. They're fine. They. I'm sure. Well, I mean, you don't really know, but I'm sure, from a financial standpoint, they are fine. But think of all the other people who lost jobs because of this very selfish tweet that she decided to put out earlier this week. Anywhere from some of the lower level writers. I mean, while writers make a good salary, if this was your first big gig, that is devastating, right? I mean, ABC, I'm sure, had committed to at least 13 episodes, if not more, if not a full season. I did not check it out, but I'm sure they committed to at least 13 episodes for the year. All of the lighting people, the sound people, the other editors, the stagehands, all these people who rely. These shows are huge economic forces on their own. Remember that to produce a half hour of network television is somewhere, I would say, in the neighborhood of about $3 to $5 million per episode. So think of all the people who are making money. Roseanne herself was pulling down, from what I read, $250,000 an episode. So that's just one portion. That was 1/20th probably of the show's weekly budget. ABC also was said to have, if you remember last week or the week before, I was talking about the upfronts where networks sell advertising time to different um, companies in preparation for the upcoming fall season. Well, on let me get a little lower to the mic. Roseanne's show, apparently ABC had written up about $45 million in advertising pre-sales. So that's more money that was lost. I don't know. I'm not sure how their salespeople get paid. In fact, if I could do things over again, I think that's probably one area I'd probably want to go into is television advertising sales. If you're selling at the network level, you are making some really good money. And $45 million in sales. So, the person or the people who sold that probably lose their what do you call it? Their commissions, right? Just at so many levels, this selfish tweet that she put out hurt a lot of people, a lot more people than just equating a black woman to an ape. And so right before I went on today, I guess Samantha Bee had said something not too friendly, actually pretty dirty, about Ivanka Trump, and this was in relationship to to I guess a tweet that Ivanka Trump had put out the other day with her children. While at the same time we are having a huge issue with children of people who are children who are I guess, well, they're saying they're missing children, or who have been separated from families who are trying to get asylum here in the United States. Anyway, Samantha Bee did call her a very bad word. It's a word that we don't use in regard to female anatomy, the C word. And while it is reprehensible that she would call her that, it's not the same as what Roseanne did with Valerie Jarrett. One of the biggest differences is that the ape compared to black people metaphor has been used for over a century, right? My mom reminded me of, she always reminds me of this one book that she remembers from many years ago, and I think I did find it in a Google book search. They show all these old books. It was called The Negro, the Beast, right? And it basically compares black people, and especially Africans, sub-Saharan Africans, Western Africans, especially, since those were the majority of people who came over on slave ships, to apes, right? And if you look at old images of blackface, oftentimes the depiction was the black people depicted in blackface oftentimes did have a exaggerated features that, especially if they were in cartoons, and not the actual people wearing blackface, but if you look at old ads or old cartoons, old comic strips with the characters in blackface, you can see how they closely oftentimes resembled apes in those pictures. So for anyone to sort of diminish what Roseanne did, I think they are fooling themselves. Now, at the same time, what was I going to say? Anyway, diminishing. They shouldn't diminish what Roseanne said. Yes. Okay, I know what I was going to say. At the same time, yes, sometimes we do, as people nowadays, with especially with social media, we do sometimes seem to be a little bit too sensitive when it comes to certain issues being brought up. But I think this is an exception. If Roseanne had had talked about Valerie Jarrett and said that she thought she was ugly. While many people would have had a problem with that, I probably wouldn't have cared much. To me, that's not the same. That's much more of a singular attack. Okay, that's your opinion that she's ugly. I know a few weeks ago, conservatives, for instance, got all up in arms over the jokes at the White House Correspondents' dinners, the jokes at the expense of Sarah Huckabee Sanders, the press secretary for the White House. And one of the big differences, people said, "Oh well, the comedian was attacking her looks," and I began to think about it a little bit today, especially when this week when we compare it to what happened between Roseanne and Valerie Jarrett. And I would say one of the big differences is that I don't know if you can really say that it was Sarah Huckabee Sanders' looks that were being attacked. You could say it was her look that was being attacked, right? Is that the same thing? Is attacking someone's look, a woman's look, a man's look, is that the same as attacking their looks? I would say your looks you can't really help. Well, maybe through cosmetic surgery, of course, but you can't really help your looks. Your look, though, is something that's your style. That's something you choose to do. I was listening today to Fresh Air on NPR. It's it's an interesting show. If you ever have a chance to listen to it, always good interviews. Terry Gross, and she had, what is his name? Talley, Leon Talley. I want to say his first name is Andre. Anyway, he used to be he used to be an editor, one of the top guys at Vogue magazine, and something that he wears all the time. He says he wears caftans and capes. Well, that's his look. That's something he chooses to do. How he looks, how his facial structure, his features, that's something, again, that most of us really can't help. So I think there is a big difference. Nevertheless, Roseanne's show has been canceled. Channing Dungey, who is the head, and I don't have a picture of Channing Dungey, she's the head of the ABC network. She is a black female. Swiftly canceled the show once the tweet was made known to ABC. And again, I don't have a problem with the show being canceled. I just do feel badly though for those involved with the show, especially those below the line people. While they might many of them make good money, but again, they may not know where their next check is coming from now that this show is gone. Some have stated, or some have brought up that Channing Dungey and the rest of the ABC network knew what they were getting into when they signed Roseanne up, based on her comedy and the tweets that she has done in the past. And I don't know if I would not have made the same decision. Definitely, I think there's plenty of room, and they even played a clip, very, very funny clip. I was never a Roseanne fan. I don't think I've ever watched a complete episode of the previous show, or the reboot. But some very, I think there was some sharp writing. I think some good storylines. There's a lot of room for comedy there. And I see nothing wrong with that. Even if you have a somewhat controversial figure, where Roseanne Barr and her character Roseanne Connor are maybe somewhat alike. But again, she crossed a line, and while she has come close, I think ABC was hoping that she would come close, but she wouldn't cross the line. And I don't think anyone expected her to go in this direction. And perhaps maybe they should have looked back, because 5 years ago she made a similar tweet about Susan Rice, who was another very close confidant. I believe Susan Rice. What was she? Was she national security advisor, something like that. She was a top person in the Obama administration back in 2013. She had equated her to apes as well. So I guess maybe ABC should have done a little more homework before signing her up. Maybe they thought she would not do it again. Initially, Roseanne had said, "Don't apologize, don't defend me." But now the latest I've heard now is that she might try to go on the offense. We shall see. But anyway, it's it has taken up a lot of our attention this past week. Is it real news? I mean, if the show had stayed on, would it really have affected our lives in a negative way? Probably not. But it's probably just as well that ABC did cancel the show. So we'll see if another network or a streaming service decides to pick it up. But nevertheless, the show is gone, at least for now. All right. Well, the other big news this week is, which is kind of ironically, it seems like a lot of what I've been doing lately is revolving around race and culture. But if you were not paying attention this week, you know that Starbucks as well. Starbucks is another made a lot of news this week in light of what happened in Philadelphia back at the beginning of April, where the two young black men were denied access to the bathroom and then actually arrested for loitering at the Starbucks. I still will contend that, as some others have, that I thought that was Starbucks' way of operating, is that they don't really pay attention to whether or not you buy coffee or not. At least I have never, prior to this incident, I had never experienced being in a Starbucks where I was forced to buy something. Now, I will admit that I usually would buy something, so usually my little kid-style tall hot chocolate. And if you're not familiar with Starbucks sizes, remember tall is small, and with no whip. And when I say kid-style, that just means it's 120 degrees and with whole milk. But you drink that thing and you nurse it. And if you stay there for 2 hours, no one seems to even bother you at all. So I am surprised that this manager became so. It was on such a mission to get these two young men out of her store. But wow, what a look at the actions. Look at what it caused in the long run. Now, some people have criticized Starbucks. Some people say they're doing it for PR, and maybe they are doing it for PR. But is that such a bad thing? To at least make your employees at least aware of some of the subtleties that others might feel when you act a certain way or when you say certain things. Sometimes these things are really done out of ignorance, right? And I mean, sometimes they are malicious. So, but making you aware of what your actions, at least what I think Starbucks was, I cannot blame them at all for going in that direction. Of course, you compare that with the NFL, and because there's still some fallout from the NFL's decision last week to penalize teams if any of their players do not stand at attention during the playing of the national anthem. And a writer that I came across an article the other day, which talked about how the NFL and let's face it, with the exception of two owners, and I only know of one. I don't know who the second owner is. There's the owner in Jacksonville is of Indian descent. They all, and then there is, according to the article, at least there is one other owner who is a non-white, but the other 30 owners are all white males. And something that the NFL has done over the years to sort of squash black culture, I guess, as it seeps into the game. For instance, one of the things, and this is one that's always bothered me. For instance, in the NFL, you cannot, the post touchdown celebration. That's something I always look forward to. I can still remember, Johnson. I cannot remember his name now. but it was Johnson, who played for, I think it was the Cowboys, and he would do the earthquake in the end zone after a touchdown, or I think his name was David Hill, who was a tight end for the Detroit Lions. In fact, he was brother of Jim Hill here in Los Angeles, sportscaster here in Los Angeles, and he would do the and I think I've lost my YouTube. Oops. Anyway, he would do the what would he do? The Cabbage Patch in the end zone after scoring a touchdown. If you recall, the Cabbage Patch dance. Terrell Owens was famous for doing something. Now maybe he went a little too far. I do recall one time when he 49ers were playing the Cowboys in, I can't remember if it was in Texas Stadium or the new stadium, but he took the ball after scoring the touchdown, ran to midfield, and sort of gesticulated somehow or did some kind of dance there at midfield on the Cowboys logo, the star, right? That was probably a little bit disrespectful, but for the most part, I always found the celebrations to be enjoyable. Something to me that fans could take in a little something extra. I know some people have said the NFL stands for the No Fun League, and definitely with this, while this may be this has much more of a political bent to it, it still is. I can see the connections that this writer is making between how the NFL has tried to squash the black culture that permeates through the league. When you consider that the fact that the league is close to three quarters of the players, are black or are of African descent. Nevertheless, though, and I said nevertheless again, but anyway, nevertheless, the NFL is still going along on its way, and we'll see what happens this season if any players do defy the rule. And we will see what also becomes of Starbucks and what kind of influence their actions this week will have going forward. All right, so what else do I have? I have tonight. Well, it just seems like like I said, there's so much going on. Oh yes, all right. Let me see if I can find this other little gem. I hope I downloaded it. Maybe I didn't. A minute. Maybe I did not. Well. Oh. Oops. No, that's not it. Oh, okay. I guess the graphic didn't come through. All right. Well, this, I don't know. Do you folks remember seeing the, I don't know, did any of you buy? All right, that's what I'll type in. I'll show it on my other screen here. There we go. All right. Got it. Let's see. Images. I'm going to go to the images right here and show you this. Okay. All right. So let's see. Let's go to full screen. Ha ha ha. And there we go. And let's go back here to video source. So, did any of you get your Korea commemorative coin for the U.S. summit that was supposed to happen on June the 12th? Then got canceled, and now they keep talking like it might happen again. Now some people are saying it might happen again. Well, if you didn't, I guess you still have time. I noticed that it's still on sale at the at the White House. Hold on, let's find that other screen here. Here we go. Oh, look at that. Yeah, you can get it. Oh, you can get it off eBay. And let's see. Here we go. The White House gift shop. The White House gift shop. All right. So you can pre-order it for. Oh wow, it's $24.95. No, $19.95. You can get it for $19.95. Sounds pretty exciting. Let's see. Anyway, I don't know if it's still available, but golly gosh, the White House and our whimsical White House. That's all I can say. Our whimsical White House, right? The latest I've heard, this morning, this morning, the administration announced, or was it yesterday? Announced new tariffs. I guess it was yesterday actually. New tariffs for the EU and for Canada and for Mexico on things like aluminum and steel and other products. And so, what do you you can expect now that those countries will also now fight back, and there is, I just don't understand the road that the administration has taken when it comes to trade. I mean, yes, things do seem to be going well right now. Manufacturing is up around the country. We do have some of the lowest ever unemployment recorded. Although that doesn't always tell the whole story, and I'm not trying to make light of the accomplishments, but it doesn't tell the whole story, because a lot of the jobs, there are many jobs that are low-wage jobs. It doesn't mean that everyone is making $75,000 a year or more. There's still a whole lot of people out there who are still making the minimum wage. In California, even, here in California, our minimum wage might now be close to 12 or 12 bucks, 12.25, 12.50 an hour. But for many people, that does not pay the bills, especially if you're a person by yourself. Even at full-time hours, that's only about $25,000 a year. And if your rent is north of $1,000 a month, well, there goes half your income right there. So there's still a lot to be done, and we don't know what kind of damage these trade policies will do down the road. All right, but enough of that depressing news. This is also, in case if you are a sports fan, then of course you know that today is Game 1 of the NBA Finals between the Cleveland Cavaliers and the Golden State Warriors. I have not watched the game, so I have no idea what the score is. It's almost 9 o'clock now. Oh, it's after 9 o'clock. So the game is probably over, or close to being over. If it's not over yet, I guess I can check a score. Let me type in here. Nevertheless, I guess that is my word for the day. Nevertheless, right? Anyway, the game. The thing I really wanted to talk about, though, as you can see, I don't know if you can tell what that is. That is a picture of LeBron James, the GOAT. Now, as you know, usually in sports, if you are the GOAT. Okay, and so here we go. I see the Warriors beat the Cavaliers in Game 1, 124 to 114. Oh, but it went to overtime, but Golden State blew them out in the overtime period, 17-7. So that's how they got the 124-114. So anyway, and Game 2 is this coming Sunday. Usually, when someone is called the GOAT usually refers to someone who has messed up, right? If you're the GOAT, you've lost the game somehow, or you're the one who's to blame. Usually short for scapegoat. But in this case, GOAT has a whole different meaning. GOAT stands for, it's an acronym, greatest of all time. And people are beginning to say that about LeBron James, that maybe he really is the greatest of all time. And I was talking to my students the other day when when it comes to doing a value speech. They had to do, or they're in the process of finishing up their persuasive speeches. And one kind of persuasive speech that you can do is a value speech, right? Where you say, this thing is better than something else. So In-N-Out, for those of you West Coast folks, In-N-Out is better than another West Coast or LA chain, Tommy's, right? Or, some are, you'll never, most of these you can never really solve, but making a case that well, of course, in the past, people used to make the case that Macs were better than PCs, or even for camera people. Since I'm looking into my Canon camera, right? Canon versus Nikon, all sorts of this versus that, right? And you can build a case for it using statistics, using expert advice, using maybe even images, right? That you might have that could show that one is better than the other, at least in your opinion, right? There is no real right or wrong answer to any of these. And so when it comes to sports, definitely we like to compare players from different eras. So for instance, in baseball, who is the greatest pitcher of all time? Is it Nolan Ryan because he has more strikeouts than anyone else? Is it Sandy Koufax because of his 4 no-hitters in 4 years? Is it could Clayton Kershaw, who happens to play here in LA, is he going to be one of the greatest? I mean, he definitely will be going down as one of the greatest of all time, but where does he rank? So we're always trying to rank players, and we're trying to rank them from different eras. So now it's LeBron, and usually the argument is centers around LeBron James versus Michael Jordan. And there is a case to be made that maybe LeBron is the greatest, but again, he's playing in a different era, somewhat different style of basketball is being played. He's playing against and with different players. All of these factors come into play, because then you go back. What about Kareem Abdul-Jabbar? What about Wilt Chamberlain? What about Magic Johnson, Isaiah Thomas? You can list a dozen. Julius Erving. There are so many players. I mean, if you want to go way back, I don't think he really comes in the conversation. But George Mikan, who was a very dominant player in the NBA's early years. So each person, each era, Oscar Robertson. There's all these different players that have contributed greatly to the game of basketball, and there's no way one can say one is really better than the other. It would just be impossible. But it certainly an argument could be made for LeBron being the GOAT. And he's been playing now for about 15 years or so. And it's really funny because for years I really didn't like LeBron James. I didn't necessarily hate him, but I certainly didn't root for him to win. And a lot of that was because I didn't like that he was crowned King James in his, 19 years old or so, first or second year in the league, and already he's being crowned as the greatest, the king. While he's I guess the joke is on me, because he certainly has earned his title. And I will admit that if he were to become a Laker, as some people are hoping. In fact, if you around town, there are a couple of billboards on some local freeways here that have been posted by a local, and I may have said this already, a local personal injury attorney, asking for LeBron, basically like asking for his hand in marriage for him to come to LA and bring his game here to bring the Lakers back to greatness, or so people would hope. He certainly has earned his stripes or maybe if he's a GOAT, earned his horns as perhaps the greatest of all time. But we will see if he can bring a championship, second championship to Cleveland in 4 years, or in 3 years, I guess it would be. I guess a strong case could be made for him being the greatest of all time. The other thing in sports that I've forgotten about, and I didn't make a logo for that, is if you are watching hockey, the Las Vegas or the Vegas Golden Knights are 3 wins away from a Stanley Cup in their first season. So we'll see how they do. All right, speaking of, this is not really the greatest of all time, but it certainly is one of the most heroic things I have ever seen in my life. I don't think I'll I don't know if I'll ever see anything like this again, and I'm sure most of you, let's see, saw this as, let me see if I can, most of you probably saw this as well, right? The well, let's see, let's just show it, right? So the young man who scaled the building in France, in Paris, to save the little 4-year-old who was dangling from that, what was that, 1, 2, 3, 4, that fourth story. Really, it's the 5th story if you really think about it. It's the 4th floor, but there was a garage below too. And somehow he gets that little kid and yanks him to safety. Yes, Mamadou Gassama is his name. Definitely a quite the hero. Just not only is it heroic, but he truly did risk his own life to save this little boy. So, and if you didn't know, the president of France, Emmanuel Macron, did grant him citizenship. You know, they gave him I guess the country gave him a medal of not valor, but a medal for his heroism, his his ability. Not his ability, but just his well, yeah, we'll just say his ability. His heroism. He got a medal for that. If you didn't know, I was looking up a little bit about Gassama. He's 22 years old. He came from the country of Mali in Africa, central western Africa there. Mali, made it to Libya, and then was able to get across the Mediterranean. And that, is a very dangerous trip that many Africans do as they try to make it to Europe, to either Spain or Italy or France. In Gassama's, I'm not sure if that's correct pronunciation of his name, but in Gassama's case, he traveled to Libya and then made it to Italy via the Mediterranean, and he got there in 2014. So and so he was just he really was in the right place at the right time. Now, this is what I didn't know. I didn't know how the little boy ended up in this situation, but according to the CNN story that I read, the father of the young child who was rescued from a Paris balcony this past Saturday was playing Pokemon Go when the incident happened. I didn't even realize people still, well, I guess somebody out there is playing Pokemon Go. I never played it, but the father was playing Pokemon Go. The story goes on to say that the father had gone out shopping, leaving the child at home alone. When he returned to the apartment, his return to the apartment was delayed when he decided to start playing Pokemon Go on his smartphone on the way back from the market. Well, the father is going to, I guess the mom of this little boy lives on Reunion Island out in, which is, I think, off the coast of either North Africa or Spain, but it's a small island out in the Atlantic. The father, though, faces up to 2 years in prison for abandoning his parental responsibilities. He will be sentenced in September, so I guess for child endangerment. Quite the story. Anyway, but I will. When I saw the video, I just couldn't believe it. I mean, how quickly he was able to scale that building, and he just seemed to. I guess it was one of those, what do you call it, out of body experiences, where he just went. Oops, and I should let me take LeBron off here. Let me put Mr. Gassama up there, but where he. There we go. That's the picture we should be showing. Where he. That's him with the president of France, as they met. He just seemingly without any fear at all, scale. I mean, you're talking to someone who won't even get I don't get on any roller coasters of any kind because those things scare me. Ladders, I'm not too good with ladders either. You know, step stool maybe. You know, and I'm still a little wobbly if I'm on a couple of steps up on a step stool. So to see someone climb up a balcony with nothing to protect him at all, to just do it the way he did it is just remarkable, and he deserves every accolade that he has received. All right, well, it is 41 minutes into the show, or at least 41 minutes since I started rolling. I'm sure some of that probably is a little bit of delay as I try to get the program going. Anyway, I just wanted to thank those of you who watch. Like I said, I thank my loyal viewers. This is something fun for me, but it's still nice to feel appreciated and have people watch you, even if it is just for a few minutes. I do hope that you will join me next week. There's a possibility that I might do the show on Wednesday of next week instead of Thursday. My niece, Samantha, my sister's second child, is graduating from high school. And depending on my meeting schedule, I'm not sure if I will be able to get to her high school in San Bernardino in time, so that's why I still might end up doing the show anyway. But if I am able to get to her school in time, then I will, if everything looks good, then I will probably do the show next Wednesday instead. So look for it on Wednesday. And congratulations to you, Samantha. All right. And let's see, who else can I... Well, and also, there's a few other people graduating. And I'm going to say congratulations to my girlfriend's daughter, Kasaya, as she finishes up high school this Saturday from Bishop Alemany High School in Mission Hills. So, big exciting weekend for a lot of young people as they move on to the next phase of their lives. But anyway, just want to say that as usual, my mantras, you know, my sayings, things always balance out, right? You might be down today, but you will be back up tomorrow. And of course, remember, don't worry about what others are doing. Don't try to beat someone else or be better than someone else. I mean, unless you're in a race or something, but otherwise, it's really not that important. The main thing is to try to be the best that you can be. If you end up being on top, that's great. If you aren't, that's great too, as long as you did your best. So remember, you don't need to try to be better than someone else. Just be the best person you can be. All right, that does it for this week's edition of the Scooting Scholar. I thank you so much once again for joining me. Let me see if I can do my out music. And that's it. It's time for me to scoot. I will see you later.